I'm very happy that so many of you came and want to listen to me, and I'm going to speak and offer my views of the benefits of free trade. And I believe that that is as important for Sweden as it could be for Russia. First, I should say I really like to be in Russia and St. Petersburg. And actually, I have been here many, many times. I was, first time I was here was when I was your age, I think. It was first time in 1984. Then I was 23 years old. So I hope you're about that age. Maybe a little younger, are you? About that age, yeah? I was first time in St. Petersburg in 1986, and I met so many young people then that I made friends. And maybe you have heard about there was a big youth festival in Moscow in 1985, and we were 20,000 young people coming from all over the world. And actually, some of the friends that I met there I still meet. Actually, this morning, I met the person who is now the chairperson of the Russian Senate, you call it Senate, the second chamber, whom I met at that time. So therefore, I am, of course, a very big advocate for making international contacts when you are in the age that you are now, because you will keep them for the rest of your life. And it's not only funny, it's also something that you could benefit from a lot. Because those you learn to know when you were young, you know that they will always tell the truth, also when you are old. So that is also why I tell you, if you have the possibility to go to another country to study or to make friends internationally, I encourage you to do it. Sweden and Russia has long-term bilateral relations, and Sweden has been a trading country already since the Vikings, even if we are much more friendly now, of course. There are many well-known Swedish companies that are active here in Russia. It's more than 400 companies, and that's including ABB, Atlas Copco, Scania, Tetra Pak. And I guess you have heard also about IKEA, H&M, Oriflame, Electrolux, Volvo. They're all Swedish companies. They are all very successful when it comes to foreign trade, and they take advantage of the free trade across the border. What you may not know is that these companies employ tens of thousands of Russians in all positions, including high-level positions. Swedish companies create new jobs. IKEA alone creates 12,500 persons in Russia and supports 60,000 local jobs for Russians who work for suppliers and subcontractors across Russia. At the same time, 35,000 jobs in Sweden by our exports to Russia. Digitization in Russia has progressed quickly, and many Swedish companies are active in the ICT and online services. This means opportunities for products and services that increase the degree of modernization and efficiency. We all know that Russia has some of the best and brightest programmers in the world. We expect to see more Russian entrepreneurs in this industry. Swedish companies in Russia are here for the long run. They have stayed through ups and downs in the Russian economy, and they will stay and expand. This is a sign that they believe in Russia and in the Russian market. I'm here today mainly to talk about why open and free trade is so important to my country and to me as a Minister of Foreign Trade. Trade has been and still is the engine behind Sweden's economic growth and prosperity, supporting private and public consumption and our welfare state. Trade and investment policy is an integral part of Swedish economic policy. Our foreign trade generates 1.4 million jobs, and we are 10 million people in Sweden, so we understand how much that is. That is about 1/3 of each job that are sustained by export. Simply put, saying no to trade has never been an option for us. An interesting future in the political landscape in Sweden is that free trade enjoys strong supporters across the political parties, the trade unions, the business community, and the public. Let me repeat again. Close to 1/3 of all jobs in my country are sustained by exports. And 99% of the population in the world does not live in Sweden. So it's necessary for us to have trade with the rest of the world. Sweden's company may not have grown to become the success stories that they are without the access to global markets. In fact, globalization has been a prerequisite for this to happen. The positive impact of job creation and some of the great examples I've mentioned have to be kept in mind when we are struggling with the challenge of today: protectionism and anti-globalization. The fact that there is public support for open trade in a country of 10 million people is a small comfort in the world where openness and free trade is under threat from many directions. Fear of openness and trade is fueled by unemployment and lack of security. It is easy to blame globalization, free trade, and openness. It is easy to take trade agreements hostage in a heated domestic policy debate. And European trade policy is influenced by an increasing negative public debate. But directing anger towards our trade policy and open society is unlikely to help our companies, our workers, and our citizens. We should not allow short-sighted protectionism. We need to create business climate where innovations are stimulated and entrepreneurs are welcome. We need to jointly stand up for our core values and defend the international order, multilateralism, the rule of law, and human rights. Openness and exchange with other countries have made and continue to make both EU and Sweden rich. Today, global value chains are a reality, with components being produced, assembled, shipped, and sold in all corners of the world. It's in the value those chains are created, not the trade surplus, which bring us wealth. Considering global value chains, the present situation, with risk of new barriers being introduced on transatlantic trade, is regrettable. Instead, we should join forces and address some of the real concerns in today's international trade. Through close cooperation, we can make sure that we, and not others, set the standards for international trade of the future. Still, I believe that there are good reasons to stay optimistic. As we continue to push for more open and free trade, we must also push for greater security and social justice for our citizens. It is obvious that European countries need to face some challenges jointly to find long-term sustainable solutions and face other challenges nationally. A progressive agenda on trade is needed, and trade, gender equality, development, and security must go hand in hand. Needless to say, we need a social Europe where the more successful compensate for the less fortunate. The solution is to offer safety nets that are strong and to welcome structural change and active labor market policy with collective agreements and social insurance schemes. With safety nets, unemployment benefits and educational programs, workers can be secure in knowing that even if I lose my job, I will be able to put food on the table for my children. Security is important in a globalized world and a necessity for change. In Sweden, our trade unions are strong supporters for free trade because it creates more jobs while knowing that those who lose their jobs due to the globalization can re-educate themselves with an income in order to move on to new jobs. It's a win-win situation. We have handled several structural transformations in our economy. All jobs in all industries have disappeared and new opportunities in new industry have emerged. What was outdated and inefficient has been replaced by something more modern and efficient, without workers suffering from unemployment and lack of resources. Rules need to develop, and the world, and as we trade and do business, has changed. We all know the multilateral talks are challenging when more than 160 countries in the WTO, the World Trade Organization, need to find consensus on complicated and very sensitive trade issues. But at this stage, we have major players in the system that don't seem to even want the system to function. The WTO as an organization is being mistreated by the very nation that gave birth to it. This is serious, and it means that all leaders, myself included, need to constantly defend the system and explain its benefits. International trade needs clear and fair international rules. All countries need to adhere to such a system which provides benefits for all. We need to meet these challenges, which also provides opportunities with decisive measures. The importance of our foreign trade is the reason why the Swedish government launched an export strategy in 2015. It aimed both at supporting traditional exporting companies to increase their exports, and maybe even more so, to encourage small and medium-sized companies to expand into international markets. Another goal was to increase Sweden's attractiveness to investments, to skills, and to tourism. The export strategy has been largely successful. Most activities in 22 different targeted areas have been carried out, and a majority with great success. Both our export and imports have grown substantially during the last few years and have reached levels never seen before. Trade is the key to the growth in our BNP. As I mentioned, sustainability will be a main priority for the whole strategy. Sweden should continue to be at the forefront when it comes to climate and environmental issues. We have the ambition to be the world's first fossil-free developed country. Our goal is an efficient, circular, and bio-based economy. In these times when free trade is challenged, we will put even more emphasis on Sweden's commitment to free, sustainable, and fair international trade. We will be even more active in international fora to constantly promote free trade and the respect for the rules in the trade area. We will work hard to sharpen our competitiveness edge in innovation and sustainability. And our engagement with other and major economies will continue based on our national interest, while also benefiting others' economy. In times when protectionism and nationalism are on the rise, we need to remember what we gain from globalization through trade. We gain jobs, growth, and prosperity. Strengthening entrepreneurship is therefore a top priority for this government. Without entrepreneurs, ideas will be lost or seized by competitors. There is a great potential if more small and fast-growing companies can reach international market early. 2/3 of Swedish exporting companies are small and medium-sized companies. And actually, you know, the unicorns, that's startups that are doing more than $1 billion. We are second only to Silicon Valley. And I guess some of you have heard about Spotify and Klarna and Mojang and Candy Crush and all of those. That are Swedish startup companies. Skype also. To reach new markets, increase our competitiveness and be successful internationally, we need to keep on reducing barriers to international trade, including through free trade agreements with our trading partners. Within the European Union, Sweden is a clear voice for free trade and against protectionist reflexes. Continue EU unity on trade policy is more important than ever. The European Union must continue to cooperate and to build alliances to preserve and develop the rule-based trading system. I believe that there are good reasons to remain optimistic. As we continue to push for open and free trade, we must also push for greater security and social justice for our citizens. The Swedish government will continue to work for a positive environment for businesses, while we continue to be equally strong advocate for greater security and social justice for our citizens. And I'm very proud that I represent a feminist government with a feminist foreign policy and a feminist trade policy. Reducing trade barriers will be of strong mutual benefits for economic development and job creation in Russia as well as in Sweden. In a country with a well-educated labor force, like in Russia, entrepreneurship, innovation, and free trade could serve as an engine for economic growth. Because it's through you, the young generation of world citizens, that we build long-lasting and ever-deepening ties between our nations. And in a world that is changing more and more quickly, the young generation will need to show the rest of the world the way forward. Thank you very much for listening. And now, I will be happy to listen to your comments and try to answer to your questions. So just raise your hand and say your name and what you're doing. Please.
So first of all, thank you for coming to St. Petersburg. We are really glad to have you here. And my only question is going to be
Your name is?
Sorry?
Your name.
Valeri. My question is going to be about IKEA. When they first tried to enter the Russian market, they were met with a lot of problems, such as corrupt officials and companies, commercial, that tried to scam them. And it, in the end, cost IKEA millions of dollars, but they overcame those problems. And so how does the Swedish government help companies when they enter such markets? Does Swedish government work with local officials when your Swedish companies have such problems here?
I can give an example. We have a bilateral committee on trade, And I and the Minister of Health, Veronica Skotskova, I think it's right, are the chairperson. And we met yesterday and have a bilateral meeting to discuss how we can work with different groups. We have one group for health, one group for environment, one group for space, and so on and so forth. And we take up different problems that we have and that the companies tell us, and then we discuss it. And today, the whole morning, we had a round table with Swedish companies and Russian companies, and there was me and the Minister for Natural Resources from Russia, and two vice ministers from Russia, the Vice Minister of Trade and the Vice Minister of Health. And then, for example, IKEA, they raised the problem that there is a new law in Russia, and the idea is that it should be more difficult to make pirate copies of different things that everybody sell. So you have to have a number on each product. The problem with IKEA is that they have 17 million products that they sell in Russia. And now they need to have a long 90-syllable number, even if you have just a mug or a glass or anything. And that will, of course, cost a lot of money and be extremely bureaucratic. That is one thing then that I and the ministers from Russia could listen to what they say and see if we could help. We also had, for example, the governor of Kaluga sitting around the table as well, because we have many companies like Volvo who has investments in Kaluga. So then they could say, but what does Swedish company need from Russia to be able to invest? And that is, for example, predictability, that is not changing very quickly, and laws and taxes and so on. And in every country in the world, you also have a problem of corruption that is very important, that all us as government representatives try to fight, and that is everywhere. So the answer to your question is, yes, we do.
Thank you for your short introduction. My name is Alexander. I'm a student of political science and world politics. And my question is can you clarify what are the usual requirements for non-EU country to enter a trade agreement or trade deal with EU? What are the usual requirements? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, as I said, trade agreement is very important, and we as members of EU, we have given away our sovereignty to the European Commission when it comes to trade. That means that even if I am a trade minister of Sweden, because I'm a member, or we are a member of EU, I'm not allowed to do a bilateral trade agreement between Sweden and another country. Germany is not allowed to make an agreement, for example, between Germany and the United States. We have all given away our sovereignty to EU. And then what we are doing now is that we have more modern and very wide trade agreements. Before, it was just take away the tariffs and maybe some other technical things. Now, in the trade agreement, we have, of course, take away tariffs, but also non-tariff barriers, and trying to get standards and other things as close to each other as possible. But we also have chapters on sustainability, workers' rights, climate, things like that. And from my government, we have said that we will not say yes to any trade agreements that is deep and broad, that has not ratified the Paris Agreement on climate. What there is also is a new investment, vad heter det? Investment court, vad heter den? Hjälp mig, investment court, vad heter den? Tvistelösningsmekanism. Arbitration, I can say, find a word, please. It's called ISDS, that if a company wants to invest in another company, in another country, then there has to be an arbitration so that if something is changed very quickly, the company should be able to get paid for their investments. This has been very, very controversial among some parts in the EU, because it has been seen as it's something that is extra positive for big companies. But that is not true as we see it. We see it just that if a company wants to invest in another country, then they have to be sure that it's not changed the political, the way that they have thought when they made the investment and not get paid for it. Investment protection agreement. For example, when Germany decided to close all nuclear power plants, we had big Swedish company who had built nuclear power plants in Germany. And of course, any government can decide whatever they want, but then of course, with these trade agreements, you have to be able to pay for the investment that has been done. And therefore, now the Swedish company is telling the German state that you have now to pay for our investment. The same happened in Sweden when we decided to close some nuclear power plants. Then there was a German company called E.ON, and then we had to pay E.ON because they have built big parts of our nuclear power plant, and the Swedish state had to pay E.ON for their investments. So I don't know if that is enough answer to your question. Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. And you told that
your name is?
My name is Margarita.
Thank you.
And you told that Asian Pacific cooperation makes some challenges for union trade, European Union, and maybe you can tell more in detail with what problems faced Swedish countries, Sweden, and maybe Russia. I don't know, something about it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, some of the main problems that Swedish company has in Russia are bureaucratic in a way. Like I said, this new law on labeling all separate products, that's a big problem. We also have a problem when it comes to very, very big fees. For example, a big problem for our companies like Volvo, you know, they make cars and buses and so on, and Scania make trucks and so on, is that when the car is finished and you have to take it and destroy it, the fee in Russia to destroy it is enormous. It's so enormous that they might not even be able to continue if you don't do anything about this. So that is one question that we took up on the round table today, that it's not normal to have such a big fee for destroying outdated trucks, for example. When it comes to Sweden and Russia, we have to follow the rules of the World Trade Organization. And here you have also problems when it comes to if you have Swedish companies that is not agreeing with Russian companies, then they can take it to WTO. And they have a mechanism for solving it. And if you are not agreeing with the result, then you can take it to the second level, and that is called the appellate body. And there are judges. What is happening now is that the United States, they are vetoing the judges of this second level. And now there is only 3 judges still there, and you have to normally 9 judges. And if those 3, if one of them gets a flu for a long time, they cannot make decisions because you need to be 3 judges to make a decision. But the worst thing is that in December, the mandate for 2 of those judges is expiring. And if the United States continue to veto, then the system will collapse. And that is one of the things that we, as trade ministers, discuss the most right now when we meet. How are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? How can we save the World Trade Organization when some of the most important thing is going to collapse? And also, I would have to say here, there is already an ongoing trade war between China and the United States. And last week, there was tariffs for $200 billion to China. And then China answered to put tariffs on $60 billion on the United States. And we cannot say, well, that is something for United States and China, because it hits Sweden and it hits Russia. Because today, you don't take one glass and then you send it and export it to another country. Today, if I do, I can take an easy thing as, or I can take first a difficult thing. A Swedish Volvo, a new Volvo. A new Volvo has tens of thousands of different products from 98 different countries. So if you have tariffs or barriers between 2 countries, it will hit the price of the Volvo because it's going back and forth. And for example, if you have in the Volvo, you know, if you have a crash, then there is this pillow that goes up. I don't know if it's called crash pillow or whatever it's called. Airbag is called. If you do an airbag, it's going from Mexico to United States, to China, back to Mexico, to United States again, because you do the tread in one of the country, you do the cloth in another country, you put it together in the 3rd country, you send it back to the 1st country to do those small things. So 6 times in 6 different countries, you send this airbag back and forth. So if you have, you know, the tariffs between 2 countries, it destroyed the whole world. That is what is called the global value chains. So that's why we are so dependent on having a free trade organization that is rule-based and transparent.
Good afternoon. My name is Stepan. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming, and also say that I really like company Volvo, because my father earns money selling these cars, and this company means a lot in my family.
Is your father a Volvo car salesman?
Yeah.
My father was Volvo sales car salesman from his 20 years till he was 65.
But my question is not about the relation of Sweden government with Russian federal government, but with governments of Russian subjects, particularly of northwest Russia. For example, Komi Republic. And my question is, does Sweden look forward to develop relations with particular subjects of Russia, and in what spheres? Thank you.
Yes, we already have a relation with different subjects, and I guess our General Counsel, Eva Sundqvist, she can tell you about the relations we have with this region, but we also have with different regions, and that is very important to us. And for example, as I said, I as Minister, I had a bilateral meeting with the Vice Governor of Kaluga this morning, because many Swedish companies has investments in Kaluga. And of course, when we go to the big cities like Petersburg and Moscow and so on, we also meet to discuss the possibilities for more investments in that region, and also for the Swedish company, what they bring up to us. So yes, we do. Do you want to say something more about this, Eva?
No, I think it's great.
Yeah, okay.
I can ask you a question later. No, it's okay.
Hello. First of all, welcome to St. Petersburg. It's a great pleasure to see you here. And as soon as you are here for the International Economic Forum, my question is motivated by...
And what's your name?
My name is Mikhail. So my question is motivated by a book of Ray Dalio. You probably heard it, about foreign trade. And this book comes from United States of America, and this book is inside recommendations of CEO of Sberbank, Herman Gref. So I recommend if you didn't read. So by the way, so at the same time, last year, Russian famous jazzman Igor Butman said during Jazz Festival, International Jazz Festival in St. Petersburg, said that it's no time to good, it's time for the best. So, motivating of these two facts, my question is, you said in the first sentences that you know Russia very well, but at the same time, I cannot say the same about your country. I've been there, but I don't know Sweden. So, for example, I've been to Stockholm, but what about other country? So my question is, what are your top 3 films about Sweden, actual films, and what are your top 3 books about Sweden?
About Sweden.
About Sweden, yes. Thank you.
Well, the first thing I said, I didn't say I know Russia very well. I say I like Russia very well. I don't think you ever can know Russia very well. It's too big and too complicated and too interesting to know Russia very well. But I like Russia very well. And now we have to help each other about the 3 best Swedish films. What is that? Mamma Mia with ABBA. Oh no, not those old ones. Let us think about it. We had a film that won. Yeah, no, that's not a good one. I think too much. So, my press secretary Clara This is the thing she should do. When the minister don't know what to say, please give me an answer. You have 2 minutes. Okay, is there some more question?
I think we have a time for last question, so please.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. My name is Timothy, and my question
Could
is...
you put it a little bit?
I'm sorry. Also, thanks for coming. My name is Timothy, and my question is, Sweden and Russia have any joint project in logistics sphere? And if yes, how could you comment if they are maybe positive for the future Swedish economy? Thank you.
In ETS and logistic?
In logistics.
In logistics. Well, I'm sure there are, because there were, on the round table today, there were a specific part of the round table was dedicated to logistics and ICT. There were Swedish companies who explained, for one thing, what they want from Russia when it comes, for example, to 5G, because if there is going to be a real ICT development, we believe that you have to invest in the 5G infrastructure, much more. And there were companies who were telling about it. I don't know that in particular, so I cannot tell you exactly, but one part of the roundtable was dedicated exactly to this. And now we have, that was, as one part was the Russia smart roads, for example. That's both logistics and ICT, where we have pilot projects with the Russian Federation of Transport Ministry, the National Telematic System, the infrastructure partners, and then there are several from other countries, but the autonomic vehicles, where Volvo is a part. And the project is to have a central digital platform, to have a digital road infrastructure, to test automatic vehicles without drivers, and to try to find technical demands that make it possible to create a digital road infrastructure to make sure that you can use automatic driverless vehicle in the Russian Federation, and what potential services that could create, and what kind of demands is needed to make this commercial. And actually they signed these yesterday, and I and the Minister and the Deputy Minister of Transportation of the Russian Federation, we were standing behind to give our blessing to the project. Have you found it?
Yes.
I think we have a minute for a last question. Do we have the last? Yeah, it's here.
Yeah, but this is in Swedish. Well, we have 3 films. One is called Änglagård, and that is the Yard of Angels. It's a very good movie. And one that is called A Man Called Ove. Movies, these are movies. A Man Called Ove. I don't know what the name is in English. It has won a lot of prizes everywhere around the world. And then this one, you have to see this one. It's called The 100-Year-Old Man Who Went Out of the Window and Disappeared.
It's a good one.
And,
I saw it.
and he meets Stalin. He meets Stalin. Yeah, he meets Stalin. It's a question of a man who lives in an elderly home that is 100 years, and then he goes out of the window and just disappears because he hates to be 100 years. And then he goes to different kind in different places in history. So he meets Stalin, he meets Winston Churchill, and it's absolutely fantastic. I know that it has been shown on film festival in Russia, so that's what you can see.
Dear Minister, tusen tack för att komma i Sankt Petersburg. Ja. Jag heter Oksana, jag kommer från Sankt Petersburg State University. And my question would be about the feminist strategy. Yes, Stefan Löfven declared that this government is the second feminist government. And my question is, can you see any differences or more effective, strategy for the foreign trade when we speak about the feminist strategy of the new government? I mean, protection of the gender equity and everything. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes. The Swedish feminist, already in 1994, the Swedish government was 50-50, 50% men and 50% women. And since 1994, it has always been like that. When it comes to the feminist foreign policy, we talk about the 4 R, and that is representation, resources, rights, and reality check. And that means that we should put all policies we do with those glasses. First, a reality check. How does it look like? What's the difference for men and women? I should take an example later. Then resources. If we want women to take as much part as men, do they have the resources that is needed for taking part or for doing, for example, the things that we want to do? Representation. What we have found is in nearly all peace negotiations, it's only men. And if you don't have women in peace negotiation, it will not be sustainable. So, for example, when we in Sweden were invited by the United Nations to have a meeting with the different parties in Yemen to try to come a little bit forward in getting peace in Yemen, we invited from the Swedish side women, because there were no women in the official delegation. And then, of course, when it comes to rights, in many, many countries, the women don't have the same rights as men. In some countries, they cannot open a bank account. But it's not only in developing countries, it's in our countries. For example, I worked in Brussels. I was head of the Department of International Affairs of the European Social Democratic Party, with all the Social Democratic Party in Europe. And then when I did my first tax, I had to pay the tax in Belgium. My husband had to sign, and then I get money back, and it went to him. He hadn't even been in Brussels. And I was so angry and frustrated, I nearly hit him. He said, it's not my fault, I cannot do anything about it. And that's the rights. I mean, there are so many things when it comes to rights. And when it comes to a feminist trade policy, there are so many things that you don't think about. For example, when you do trade agreements, you often don't think that there are different ways that men and women earn money. So in some areas, you don't take away tariffs on areas where especially women earn their money, for example. And if you don't put those things in the trade agreement, there will be a bias against women. If you only think if you don't do a concrete analysis, then it will be on another way. I should take some issue that was ridiculed from the beginning, And that is that when you take away snow in the winter, we said, is there a feminist way to take away snow? And people started to say, that's ridiculous. There is no feminist way to take away snow. And then, okay, say, let's do an analyze. And what we find was that it's mostly men who drive the cars in the inner city. And it's mostly women, especially women when they have babies and strollers, who use the pavements. And what did, when they took away snow, what happened? Every time they took away snow, first from the streets, where the men drive their car, and later they took away the snow from the pavements, where the women were going. And that meant that the women had 10 times more, or so much more, injuries, because since the pavements were not, the snow was not taken away there first, they, halka, they slipped, broke an ankle, broke, the foot, and had to go to hospital. So there was a clear feminist way of taking away snow in the city. And in nearly all areas, if you do a proper feminist analysis, you see that. That goes for nearly all areas, and including trade. We have, if you go to our homepage, the Swedish government, and you look for feminist foreign policy, we have a whole book in English that is explaining very detailed our feminist foreign policy. So if you're interested, please look it at the internet.
And it's such a pleasure to listen to you, and thank you very much for this meaningful conversation. And unfortunately, according to the timing, we need to finalize this discussion. Thank you once again for coming, and I really hope that something good very soon will bring you again to Russia and to St. Petersburg, and we will have a chance to welcome you here at HSC again, so thank you.